April 1952. Roanoke, Virginia. Inside a shop floor the size of 3 football fields, a locomotive rolls off the assembly line. It weighs 582,900 pounds. Its boiler holds 300 pounds of pressure per square inch. 16 driving wheels sit under 522,850 pounds of adhesive weight, each one 58 inches across. No single diesel engine on Earth produces the power this machine delivers at the drawbar. Its road number is 2200. It is the last of its kind. And every other railroad in America has already stopped building machines like it. Have you ever watched something built to last get scrapped because the people in charge stopped caring what they had? Drop it in the comments. And if you want the engineering stories nobody else is covering, subscribe to American Iron Works. The Norfolk and Western Railway did not buy locomotives, it built them. For 69 years, the Roanoke Shops designed, fabricated, and assembled steam power from raw steel. No outside builder, no catalog orders. Every rivet, every casting, every valve was an in-house decision made by machinists who had been refining the same fundamental design since 1912. At its peak in the 1930s, the Roanoke Shops employed over 6,000 workers. On any given day, 4 steam locomotives and 20 freight cars were under construction simultaneously. The facility had its own foundry, its own machine shop, its own boiler works. It was the largest single employer in the Roanoke Valley, and every piece of rolling stock it produced carried a nameplate that read, "Built at Roanoke." The design that defined Norfolk and Western's freight operations was the 2882 compound Mallet. The word compound describes how the engine uses steam. High-pressure cylinders at the rear receive fresh steam from the boiler first. That steam does its work, then passes forward into larger, low-pressure cylinders that extract energy from it a second time. 1 pound of steam does the job twice. Most railroads abandoned compound designs by the 1930s. The Union Pacific's Big Boy, the largest steam locomotive ever built, used a simple expansion system where all 4 cylinders received high-pressure steam directly. Simple expansion produced more raw tractive effort at low speed, but it consumed more fuel per ton-mile because the steam only worked once. Norfolk and Western went the other direction. Instead of making bigger boilers, its engineers made smarter plumbing. By 1948, the Norfolk and Western mechanical team had been refining the compound 2882 for 36 years. The result was the Y6b class. 30 of them rolled out of Roanoke between 1948 and 1952. Each one produced 5,500 indicated horsepower at 25 miles per hour. Each one hauled 13,500 tons on level track, unassisted. On the Crewe to Lambert's Point coal corridor, the railroad rated them for 14,500 tons. And unlike earlier compound mallets that could only run in compound mode at crawling speeds, the Y6b had what Norfolk and Western called variable valve plumbing. Crews could switch between simple and compound operation at any speed, using a manual reducing valve in the cab. Start a 14,500-ton coal train in simple mode for maximum grip. Switch to compound once the train is rolling, and let the physics of double expansion do the work. The Roanoke Shops engineers added 26 tons of lead ballast to the front engine frame to keep the wheels from slipping under the extra tractive effort. Earlier compound mallets on other railroads topped out at 8 or 10 miles per hour. Slow, lumbering pushes. The Y6b ran at 50 miles per hour in regular service. Some engine men reported pushing past 60 on favorable grades, though the railroad never officially confirmed those numbers. The Y6b was not a brute. It was a precision instrument built by people who had spent 4 decades learning what worked. And it ran on the one fuel that Norfolk and Western's entire business depended on: coal. This is the part of the story that never gets the attention it deserves. Norfolk and Western was America's premier coal hauling railroad. Coal was its single largest source of revenue. Its trains carried millions of tons of Appalachian bituminous coal from the mines of West Virginia and Virginia to the export piers at Lambert's Point in Norfolk. The Y6b burned the same fuel it hauled. Every ton of coal that went into the firebox was a ton that came from the same mines the railroad served. The coal companies that shipped on the Norfolk and Western watched their biggest customer burn their product in the very locomotives that carried it. Switching to oil-burning diesel meant a coal railroad would stop burning coal. The irony was not subtle, it was structural, and the Roanoke Shops had also solved the one problem that gave diesel its biggest argument against steam. Turnaround time. Steam locomotives are famously slow to service. Ash removal, boiler washing, lubrication, inspection. Most railroads needed 8 to 12 hours between runs. That downtime is expensive. A locomotive sitting in a roundhouse is not earning revenue. The Norfolk and Western built purpose-designed facilities called lubritoriums at 5 locations across the system: Schaffers Crossing in Roanoke, Bluefield, Williamson, Portsmouth, and Pulaski. No other railroad had anything like them. Bright, modern, specialized structures where a Y6b rolled in, got serviced, and rolled out in 90 minutes. The roller bearings and automatic lubricators on every axle made the maintenance requirements, in the railroad's own internal assessment, comparable to diesel. In 1952, the railroad ran the test that should have settled the argument once and for all. Y6b number 2197 lined up against a 4-unit set of Electromotive Division F7 diesels. Same route, same tonnage, same conditions. Before the test, the Roanoke Shops had modified 2197 with what later historians would call a booster valve, a system that fed superheated high-pressure steam directly into the low-pressure cylinders during heavy pulls. The modification boosted its drawbar horsepower by 26% and its tractive effort to 170,000 pounds force. Some critics later accused N&W of rigging the test. Robert Le Massena wrote in Trains magazine in November 1991 that the modifications gave 2197 an unfair edge. But the consensus among later analysts, including Louis Newton and David Stevenson, writing in The Arrow through the 1990s, was that N&W publicized every modification and later applied them across the fleet. The test result was a tie on fuel costs. N&W's president, Robert H. Smith, looked at the data and saw no reason to switch. The railroad declined to order a single diesel locomotive. For 3 more years, the Y6bs kept hauling coal. The lubritoriums kept turning power in 90 minutes. The compound mallets kept producing more drawbar horsepower than any single diesel unit available for purchase. Then, on April 1, 1958, Robert H. Smith retired. Stuart T. Saunders took his chair. Saunders had no attachment to steam. Rush Loving Jr., in his book The Men Who Loved Trains, wrote that Saunders saw no use for the steam locomotive at all. He did not commission new tests. He did not revisit the 1952 data. Within months of taking office, he ordered 268 GP9 diesel locomotives from Electromotive. He did not even wait for his own passenger diesels to arrive. He leased E-units from the Atlantic coastline and the Richmond, Fredericksburg, and Potomac to cover the gap. By the end of 1958, the first Y6bs were heading to the scrapyard. The streamlined J-class passenger locomotives went with them. The Class A fast freight articulateds followed. The standard explanation is clean. Saunders saw the future. Diesel was cheaper in total cost of ownership. Steam was finished. That explanation is incomplete. The real reason the Y6b died had nothing to do with Stuart Saunders. Every other Class I railroad in America had already dieselized by the mid-1950s. The Pennsylvania Railroad, the New York Central, the Santa Fe, the Southern Pacific, all gone to diesel. One by one, they scrapped their steam fleets and shuttered their steam shops. When those fleets disappeared, the manufacturers who supplied the parts that no single railroad built in-house disappeared with them. Bearing packings, feedwater heater components, generators, injectors, automatic lubricator assemblies. Ken Miller, a railroad historian interviewed for the PBS documentary Norfolk and Western Railway, Steam, Steel, and Storylines, identified this as the force that made dieselization inevitable on the N&W. The companies that manufactured these accessories, firms like Worthington, Alesco, and Nathan had built products for an entire industry. By 1955, that industry had one remaining customer. That number changes how this entire story reads. Which part of it surprises you more? That the machine was still competitive, or that the market killed it anyway? Norfolk and Western was the last buyer in a dead market. The railroad built its own locomotives. It machined its own cylinders, cast its own frames, fabricated its own boilers. But it could not manufacture every component from raw materials. The roller bearings came from Timken, the feedwater heaters came from Worthington, the stokers came from Standard. Each of these suppliers had served dozens of railroads. Now they served one. And a company does not keep a production line running for a single customer hauling coal through the mountains of Virginia. Robert H. Smith understood this before Saunders ever arrived. His quiet decision to order the first GP9S in 1955, 3 years before he retired, was not a betrayal of steam. It was a recognition that the supply chain supporting steam no longer existed. The machine had not failed. The world around it had moved on. Saunders finished what the parts vendors had started. The scrapping was fast. Between 1958 and 1961, 28 of the 30 Y6b locomotives went to the cutting torch. When the N and W officially ended mainline steam operations in 1959, 50 Y6 series locomotives were still in active service in the coal fields. Not stored, not sidelined, working. Pulling coal through the Appalachians on the same mountain grades they had been designed for, waiting for diesel replacements that were still on flat cars somewhere between LaGrange, Illinois, and Roanoke. The N&W was the last major railroad in the United States to run steam in regular revenue service. By the time Saunders ordered the cutoff, the photographer O. Winston Link had already spent 4 years documenting what he knew was a disappearing world. His black and white images of N&W steam at night, lit by massive flashbulbs in the mountains of Virginia, are now considered among the most important photographs in American railroad history. He was not photographing nostalgia. He was photographing evidence. On July 11, 1959, Y6b number 2174 and Class A number 1240 hauled the N&W's farewell to steam excursion from Roanoke to Bluefield and back. Number 1240 pulled the train westbound over the Blue Ridge grades. At Bluefield, the consist was handed off to 2174, which hauled it through the Pocahontas Division to Aiga before returning. After that final run, 2174 was sold to the United Iron and Metal Company, a scrapyard in Roanoke. The owner stored it alongside Y6b2, 189, and Y62143 in a quiet corner of the yard. He was not in a hurry. He understood what the locomotive was. By 1967, number 2189 was cut up, but 2174 and the tenderless 2143 sat untouched for years. Local rail fans knew they were there. The Roanoke chapter of the National Railway Historical Society began working to save them. They needed $50,000, the scrap value of the pair. In 1975, the scrapyard's owner sold the business to Bird International Company, a British corporation. The new owners did not know what a Y6b was. During a slump in the global steel market, Bird International ordered both locomotives cut up. The Roanoke chapter got 30 days to raise the money. They could not do it. On February 16, 1976, the torches reached Y6b number 2174. It was the last of its class, 30 locomotives. The machines that railroad historian Greg Mills evaluated against every articulated in American history on weight, power-to-weight ratio, economy of operation, and quantity built, and called the most successful articulated locomotive ever built. The machines that tied a 4-unit F7 diesel on fuel costs and hauled 14,500 tons of coal while the rest of America's steam fleet burned in scrapyards. All 30 gone. A British firm from the country that invented compound steam destroyed the last American perfection of it for the price of $50,000 that nobody could raise in 30 days. Today, one Y6 series locomotive survives anywhere on Earth. Y6 A number 2156 at the National Museum of Transportation in St. Louis. It is the closest relative to a Y6b that still exists. No Y6b will ever turn a wheel again. The machine that pulled 13,500 tons, matched a diesel in a fair test, and turned around in 90 minutes did not die because something better replaced it. It died because the industry that fed it parts vanished, and the one executive who believed in it retired on March 31, 1958. The next morning, the replacement was already placing orders. If this is the kind of story that deserves to be told, subscribe to American Iron Works.